When the charming Mr. Thompson turned sinister, can I rally my neighbors and expose his twisted plot before it's too late? It was a quiet morning in our sun-drenched backyard, where I sipped coffee as the palm trees swayed gently in the breeze. This slice of paradise had been everything I dreamed of when we relocated to Florida, the warm sun wrapping around me like a comforting embrace. My eyes roamed the water lapping against the shore, a glint of sunlight dancing on its surface, as I relished the serene sounds of nature. Little did I know, the tranquility of that morning would be shattered by a reality I could never have anticipated. A sharp knock on the door startled me, pulling me out of my thoughts. I opened it to find a uniformed delivery man standing there, his expression serious, almost stern. He held a manila envelope as if it were a ticking time bomb, and the moment I saw it, dread settled in the pit of my stomach. "The state has plans to seize your property for a toll bridge," he stated flatly, each word sending tremors of disbelief through my body. I felt the ground beneath me shift as my heart raced, and I stumbled back into the warmth of my home, suddenly feeling cold as ice. My mind raced with flashes of memories of Mr. Thompson, the charming yet slippery realtor who had sold us this idyllic piece of land. He had wooed us with visions of sunlit mornings and peaceful evenings by the water. His easy smile had filled my heart with hope, but now I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been drawn into a web of lies. Had he known about this impending doom when we signed the papers? Had he just been a pawn in a game played by cunning developers and faceless bureaucrats? As I sat at the kitchen table, a million thoughts collided, churning into a storm inside my head. The delivery man said I would have to vacate by month's end or face demolition orders. Vacate? Leave my home? My sanctuary? My paradise? The notion felt absurd and devastating. I felt a tightness in my chest, a swell of indignation and disbelief. This couldn't be happening. My husband Jake entered the room, his face pale as he caught my eye, clearly sensing my distress. I laid the situation bare, all the words tumbling out in a frantic rush. He listened, his brows furrowing deeper with each sentence. "This is our home, something we worked so hard for," he said, disbelief coloring his tone as the reality sunk in. I couldn't help but feel the weight of betrayal gnawing at me, a deep-seated anger bubbling to the surface as I recalled all the trust I had placed in Mr. Thompson. The weeks that followed felt like an unrelenting nightmare. We scrambled to gather every shred of evidence to fight back against the state's decision. Papers cluttered our kitchen counters as we sought legal advice to understand what was happening. We made desperate appeals to anyone who would listen, clinging to the false hope that we could somehow keep our home. The more we researched, the clearer the picture became. The government was weaponizing laws meant to benefit the common good against us, the common folk. Each night we went to bed with the specter of demolition looming over us, our dreams haunted by images of our home reduced to rubble. Friends stopped by occasionally, their expressions an odd mix of sympathy and disbelief, as if they couldn't fathom the darkness enveloping us. They shared our disbelief and offered advice, but deep down, I sensed that many of them also feared it might happen to them one day. As days bled into nights, I paced our beloved home like a caged animal, unable to settle, unable to think clearly. An idea began to crystallize in my mind. We needed to find Mr. Thompson. The frustration grew into a burning desire to confront the man who had brought us here. I recalled his smooth words, sharp suits, and the way he looked at us, all charm and predatory glint. If anyone warranted accountability for this situation, it was him. One evening, as dusk fell over the water, casting long shadows that stretched across the palm-studded yard, I picked up the phone. Every ring that echoed in my ear felt like the ticking of a clock counting down to our demise. My pulse quickened when I finally heard his voice on the other end. "Mr. Thompson, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Of course, Claire," he replied, that infuriatingly smooth tone still intact. "What can I do for you?" I felt anger bubbling up as I unleashed all my doubts, frustrations, and fears on him. He listened, or pretended to, and promised to meet us. I wondered if he felt guilt poking at him, or if he was too entangled in his own greed to feel anything at all. The truth wove itself into a labyrinth of despair, stronger than ever. Our paradise was slipping away, and Mr. Thompson was at the heart of it, lingering like a shadowy figure against the golden sun. In the end, our fight wasn't just to save a house. It was a stand against the forces that silenced small property owners, crushing dreams under the weight of legal jargon and development greed. As I hung up the phone, I felt an eerie sense of foreboding settle into my bones. What I didn't realize was that our battle was just beginning, and buried within the chaos lay secrets that could change everything. The sun dipped low in the Florida sky, casting an ominous orange hue over the water, as I sank deeper into despair. Every evening echoed with the whispers of my agitation, a mere reflection of the chaos swirling inside me. I felt trapped in a nightmare, where each passing moment gnawed at my spirit like a relentless tide eroding the shore. Desperation clawed at me as I decided to finally dig deeper into Mr. Thompson's past. I needed to know everything about the man who had turned my life into a painful charade. I spent days scouring social media, online forums, and public records, piecing together a mosaic painted in regret and despair. The families I contacted spoke with shaky voices, layering each story with hints of betrayal and sleepless nights. It was alarming how consistent their experiences were. Odd dealings, last-minute changes in property titles, financial discrepancies that seemed to vanish into thin air, just like our dreams of keeping our home. I felt like a detective, connecting dots on a murky board, piecing together the web of deceit that cascaded like a looming fog around Mr. Thompson. What struck me was the stark realization that this wasn't just about our home. I was grappling with a network of manipulation that had ensnared countless innocent homeowners. I had gathered letters, photographs, and conversations, accumulating almost enough evidence to confront him. Just as I prepared for that moment of truth, a letter arrived, its mere presence sending a jolt through my spine. It was from Mr. Thompson, the predator now turned victim, suing me for defamation, claiming I was slandering his reputable name. My heart raced as I read the lines over and over, each word steeped in his trademark arrogance, twisting the narrative as if he were the aggrieved party. Could he really show up in court and spin tales of his integrity while I stood there, fighting to preserve what scraps of my life remained? I sat on the edge of my bed, staring blankly at the wall as the weight of his claim pressed down on my shoulders, choking me with disbelief. It felt far too easy for someone like him to exploit the fear and desperation I was now drowning in. I wasn't just up against legal jargon and bureaucratic procedures. I was battling a seamless machine of deceit designed to grind the average homeowner into submission and oblivion. Who was I to challenge a man who seemed to operate outside the realm of accountability? My mind buzzed with confusion and fury as I realized the fight for our home was morphing into something larger, an undeniable war against a hidden system that perpetuated the misery of honest people. One evening, I sat at our kitchen table with Jake. The evidence spread like a betrayal in front of us. "This is a threat," Jake said, his voice steady but laced with tension. "He's trying to silence you. We can't let him get away with it." I knew deep down that he was right. We couldn't roll over. That realization ignited something fierce within me, kindling a spark I thought had been doused in the wake of our impending doom. Determined to stand my ground, I rallied my courage and reached out to others damaged by Mr. Thompson. Each phone call, each conversation rekindled my sense of purpose, bringing forth stories that echoed my own. Families uprooted overnight, houses sold under veils of false promises. It was as though a hidden camaraderie blossomed among us, and with it, the knowledge that I was no longer fighting alone in this skewed game. Even as I gathered strength, shadows of the impending lawsuit loomed like dark specters. There was a court date now, an inevitable confrontation waiting to unfold, and every time I closed my eyes, I envisioned it, my voice breaking through their silence as I fought for justice. Days turned into a whirlwind as I tried to juggle between gathering evidence, preparing arguments, and searching for support. The stakes escalated, morphing into a chaotic ballet of perseverance and anxiety. Yet, just when I thought I had solid footing, fresh whispers crept in. Mr. Thompson's legal actions had caused ripples in the community, many feeling the icy tendrils of fear closing around them. I wondered how deep his influence ran, how many were trapped like us, in a web of his creation. That night, with the wind rustling the palm leaves outside, I felt an unsettling aura fill our home. Something was brewing beneath the surface, something that hinted at a larger scheme I had yet to unravel. Perhaps there was still hope, a chance to turn the tide against him. Our battle was just beginning, and amid the chaos lay secrets that could alter everything we thought we knew about Mr. Thompson and the plan unfolding before us. As the warm dusk settled over the neighborhood, the golden beams of sunlight melted into the horizon, casting long shadows over the property shops and dreams now dangling by a thread. There we were, my family and I, standing in our driveway, clutching hastily made signs adorned with poignant slogans like "Save Our Homes" and "Hands Off Our Waterfront." Desperation surged through me, amplified by the oppressive sense of urgency that engulfed our lives. The looming deadline tightened around us like a noose. If we did nothing, our home would soon be lost under the cold, metallic weight of a bulldozer, swallowed by the tide of government plans that had zero regard for the people who had built their dreams on these grounds. We had scoured every option after seeking legal counsel to combat this unprecedented seizure of our property. We felt a spark of hope reignite. However, the lawyer we hired was clearly overmatched. Perched behind a desk littered with papers like a shipwrecked sailor, he seemed overwhelmed by the sheer complexities of eminent domain law. Instead of exchanging jargon-laden strategies, he spent more time flipping through dusty binders than providing the guidance we so desperately sought. I could feel betrayal bubbling to the surface once more, this time from the very legal system designed to protect us. The dull thrum of anxiety in my chest pulsed heavier with each passing moment. Frustrated with my initial choices, I turned to the community for support. I started reaching out to neighbors and friends, sharing our plight, and rallying them for a protest against the upcoming toll bridge. Each conversation revealed layers of shared pain and frustration, a testament to the affected families that stood alongside us. With this surge of collective resolve, we decided to gather one evening in the park, our signs hoisted high like banners of a war we could hardly understand. Our hearts raced with anticipation as the sun began to dip, painting the sky in shades of fiery red and burnt orange. Would the local officials take notice? However, as the event unfolded, I felt a chill creeping in despite the comforting warmth of dusk. Just beyond our gathered ranks, I spotted him, Mr. Thompson, clad in a perfectly tailored suit and armed with that infuriatingly disarming grin. His polished demeanor stood in stark contrast to the anger radiating from us, and there he was, flanked by local officials, embodying a world of indifference to our cries. This was a man who had once charmed us into purchasing our dream home, now casually dismissing our concerns, as if we were mere inconveniences in his grand plan. Our voices rang out in unison, desperate pleas for recognition, but Mr. Thompson stood unmoved, his toothy smile unyielding, eyes glinting with satisfaction. As I caught his gaze for just a moment, I sensed that he relished the chaos he had ignited. The more fervently our shouts echoed, the more he seemed to enjoy the spectacle, wringing his hands as if to say, "Look how easy it is to tug the strings of these homespun souls." It felt less like a protest and more like a mockery directed at us. How could someone who had once seemed so polished and respectable morph into a symbol of everything that was wrong with our community? As the local officials barely acknowledged our pleas, I sensed the very fabric of hope unraveling within me. Talk of bureaucracy filled the air, while I fought to reclaim my voice above the din. I glanced at my neighbors. Their expressions mirrored my own, deflated and afraid. Here we were, gathered in a last-ditch effort. Yet the looming power of Mr. Thompson made us feel small and helpless. Just as I thought our protest would ignite a spark in the hearts of officials, the truth was made strikingly clear: they were not listening. Simply put, we were shouting into the void. With dwindling time to spare, the oppressive sense of defeat seeped deeper into my bones. I felt cold realization wash over me. We had lost our only chance to fight back. The kind words of encouragement we had shared felt like faint echoes in the presence of his smirking confidence, and doubt began to claw at my resolve. How could I stand against a figure like Mr. Thompson, someone seemingly so powerful, so unassailable? A man who wore cunning like a cloak and walked among us, seemingly untouchable. The weeks blurred together as I wrestled with feelings of security and betrayal, my mind a storm of confusion. While Jake stood by my side, urging me to keep pushing forward, the emotional cost felt unrelenting. I began to realize that our fight was not just about our home. It had morphed into a fight for the very spirit of our community, a battle against blind progress that would leave behind wreckage and despair in its wake. I devoted my days to gathering evidence and reaching out to other homeowners as the clock ticked down to our deadline. Yet, as I leaned into the chaos of our situation, I couldn't help but wonder how deep did Mr. Thompson's machinations truly run. Detached as he seemed, it was becoming clear that the essence of our plight was tangled in a more significant scheme than I had initially believed. The layers of betrayal doubled, and with each new discovery, the stakes rose higher. There was something insidiously magnificent about Mr. Thompson, and faced with his unwavering confidence, I began to forge a new resolve within myself, kindling that spark I thought had been extinguished. The fight was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning. My spirit, reclaimed, became a quiet storm surging beneath the surface, setting the stage for a reckoning that neither I nor Mr. Thompson had anticipated. A friend suggested that perhaps the only way to confront our fears was to understand them better, and this idea took root within me. Determined, I began mapping out potential allies, lawmakers who would listen to our plight and take a stand not just for our family, but for the community that endured under the weight of the toll bridge project. What emerged was not merely a protest, but an unwavering commitment to mobilize every voice that had been threatened, entwined with the fiery determination of a community that had already lost too much. Driven by fury that coursed through my veins like wildfire, I confirmed my suspicions about Mr. Thompson. He had been funneling kickbacks from the state contracts, deftly maneuvering behind our backs to expedite the destruction of our homes. The realization felt heavier than a ton of bricks, yet it ignited a fearsome resolve within me. I spent sleepless nights poring over financial documents I managed to unearth from the courthouse, a trail of whispers and numbers that cried out for justice. If I could expose him at the upcoming council meeting, perhaps it would sway the tide back toward us, back to the dignity we deserved amid this turmoil. However, that hope was tempered by the reality of living under a cloud of impending doom. The days blurred and felt like a distorted loop, each fading light signaling my ever-approaching deadline as the destruction of our home loomed like a dark shadow. My family was under immense stress, caught between the heartbreak of losing our sanctuary and the fight for survival against a force that felt intangible yet so ruthless. I nearly choked on despair with each passing moment. Could I really make a difference? With a sinking heart, I meticulously engineered my plan, figuring out how to corner Mr. Thompson and expose him to the very people who had once trusted him. I crafted a presentation that laid bare the truth photos, written accounts, and evidence that painted a damning picture of his collusion with the very folks supposed to represent us. But even as I gathered my materials, doubt crept in. Would the council even listen to the masses when a polished figure like him stood before them, ready to downplay our pain with his practiced charm? What if they dismissed me as just another angry homeowner with no real standing? As I prepared my notes, a storm began brewing outside. Dark clouds rolled in, relentless and powerful. Nature seemed to echo my fury, reminding me of how forceful life could be. I felt a sting of foreboding creep over me. Was this storm a harbinger of the chaos to come? Just as I felt the tide turning in our favor, that fierce tempest roared in, bringing heavy rain that pelted our neighborhood with a vengeance, and was in stark contrast to the golden sun that had shone just hours earlier. One by one, my neighbors altered their plans, abandoning our protest march, citing safety concerns and treacherous conditions. A sense of helplessness washed over me. The council meeting, a rare opportunity to confront Mr. Thompson, was canceled, swept away by the murky depths of the storm. Standing in my home, clutching my notes as sheets of rain lashed against the windows, I felt utterly defeated. The storm felt like more than just an inconvenience. It was a cruel twist of fate that felt almost deliberate. But then, through the roaring of wind and rain, I caught a snippet of conversation through an open window. It was Mr. Thompson just a few blocks down, in a fleeting moment of unchecked arrogance as he spoke to an aide. He laughed, a sound that chilled my bones, boasting about how easy it would be to bulldoze our lives aside, treating us like pieces on a chessboard to be sacrificed for his gain. His contempt was as palpable as the rain drenching the earth outside. The realization that he reveled in our suffering was enough to steel my resolve further. While my family struggled to find solace amid the chaos, my heart pounded with new fury. It became clear to me this fight against Mr. Thompson and his nefarious methods wasn't just about saving our home. It had evolved into a broader struggle against a system that had forgotten the faces behind the policies, a struggle that required me to gather my courage and fight for the dignity of all whose lives were tangled in this web of betrayal. As the rain poured down stubbornly, I recalled the faces of my neighbors, the tears of frustration, and the stories of dreams shattered by big industry and corrupt governance. Perhaps I could still salvage this situation. Perhaps our voices could rise together. So I sat down, determined to draft a letter to the newspaper, hoping to fuel the fire of community outrage, inviting the press to cover the story of a hopelessly underestimated fight against those who believed they could dismantle our lives without consequence. If we stood together, maybe we could wrestle back control from the clutches of apathy and corruption. The storm raged on, washing away our initial protest, but I felt the embers of rebellion glowing within me, quiet promise that we wouldn't give up without a fight. For every home marked for demolition, there was a family's dream on the line, and I intended to ignite the desire for justice that still flickered in the hearts of all of us besieged by this relentless progress. The stakes had never been higher. We had become more than a collective of distressed homeowners. We were the voice of a community united against the tide of injustice, and we would find a way to be heard. As dusk settled over our neighborhood, the last light of day cast long shadows across the street, signaling the encroaching darkness of uncertainty enveloping our lives. My heart raced in my chest as I clutched the classified documents in my hands, a collection of evidence that could prove not only that Mr. Thompson was corrupt, but that the bridge plans had been stamped and approved before we even had the chance to buy our so-called paradise. The violation of our trust felt like an ice pick stabbing at my gut, and with every beat, I felt the resolve swell within me. I had to act fast before it slipped away, and before my children would have to witness the destruction of our home. Bounding towards the local news station, adrenaline coursing through my veins like liquid fire, I envisioned the headlines. Local family fights corruption over seized property. My feet pounded against the pavement, fueled by the sheer weight of injustice bearing down on me. Yet, Just as my hopes began to lift in anticipation of drawing public sympathy, doubt crept in, whispering that nobody would care. Mr. Thompson's silver-tongued charisma had already lured countless people away from the truth. What chance did I have? When I finally reached the station, the sterile interior felt suffocating. After what felt like an eternity, I was ushered into the office of a local reporter, eager to share my story. "You won't believe how deep this goes," I implored, spilling the evidence and my fears. But instead of the encouragement I desperately sought, the reporter's expression shifted to one of skepticism. I could almost see Mr. Thompson's shadow lingering over him. He had clawed his way into the trust of even the media. Instead of the outrage I expected, I was met with ridicule-catchy sound bites about angry locals and a dismissive wave towards the door. "This sounds a bit dramatic, don't you think?" the reporter quipped, leaning back in his chair, a smirk etched firmly on his face. My heart sank as I left the station, feeling utterly defeated. The very entity that should have stood for us became yet another patron of the interests of men like Thompson. But even as despair threatened to smother me, something deep inside ignited with my home at risk. Failure was not an option. As I dragged myself through the doorway of our cluttered house, the sweet scent of the roses from our garden filled my nostrils, a stark reminder of everything we stood to lose. I pictured the blooming flowers that had flourished just outside our kitchen, the last vestiges of our dreams. But that was all drowned out a moment later, when I heard the unmistakable rumble of machinery. My heart plummeted as I raced out to the street, my eyes widening in horror at the sight before me. A bulldozer was rolling through my neighborhood like a vengeful beast, its steel maw ready to devour our memories. My vision blurred as I saw the petals of my roses scattered like tears, crushed beneath the tires of that monstrous machine. An overwhelming sense of loss washed over me, both for our home and the community that had stood so strong until now. But behind that despair, a roaring tide of rage began to swell. This wasn't just about property. It was about lives intertwined with this grounded tapestry of history that the government and Thompson believed they could erase without consequence. I knew I had to gather every neighbor who still believed in our fight. Each face I passed felt like a reminder of the family we were losing, and in a moment of clarity, I felt my heart beat in sync with their shared fury. I had to spread the word. I had to rally our spirits and invigorate everyone into this battle for justice. This bulldozer would not take our homes without a fight. Just then, I noticed a few neighbors peeking through their windows, sullen yet watching. I made my way to them, fueled by desperation to unite them against this tidal wave of corruption that threatened to sweep us all away. With urgency in my voice, I called out, "Let's gather! We can't let them take our homes and believe we'll just roll over. They think we're weak, but we have truth on our side." I felt a flicker of hope ignite in my chest. Maybe we could mount a defense against Mr. Thompson's insidious plans together. As I reached the last house on the street, I realized that perhaps we were not just a collection of broken families. We were a community with the power of unity right at our fingertips. Even as the bulldozer revved its engine ominously just beyond my vision, I felt lighter every word exchanged, and every pledge of solidarity ignited a further commitment to protect each cherished dream that once bloomed on our land. Tomorrow we would begin anew in this fight. We would not go quietly into that dark night of destruction. As the sun drew its final breath beyond the horizon, the universe aligned, providing me with another chance to gather those who still dared to dream. There was a reckoning ahead, one that would demand not just our voices, but a revelation that could crumble the very foundations of Mr. Thompson's illicit empire. The dawn of the demolition day found me on my porch, clinging to a rusted hammer as the heavy machinery rolled in like a monstrous awakening. The sun peeked over the horizon, spilling a warm light across our once-cherished garden, its slow ascent illuminating how surreal it all felt as if I were trapped within a nightmare. I could hear the distant hum of the bulldozer, each rumble resonating deep within my chest, stealing the breath from my lungs. My heart raced, the optimistic dreams we had nurtured for so long now teetering on the brink of annihilation. But just as I thought it was over, I looked up to see Mr. Thompson laughing with the crew, the owner of my shattered dreams, leaning against the machinery like a lord surveying his empire. That mockery ignited something primal within me. I wanted nothing more than to scream and hurl the hammer at him, to shatter his smug veneer of confidence that shielded him from the devastation he was inflicting. Yet I held back, grounding myself in the bitter truth. If I did anything rash, it would only fuel his joy. Clenching the hammer tighter, I reminded myself that I needed to be shrewd, that each moment was a chess move in an escalating game where my family's future was the stake. I needed a plan, a way to expose him, and somehow turn this travesty on its head. Just as I stood frozen, paralyzed by a blend of fury and despair, My phone buzzed in my pocket like a desperate call to action. I retrieved it, glancing down at the screen to find an unknown number flashing ominously. My instincts battled my curiosity, but eventually I swiped to answer, bracing myself for yet another telemarketer or automated service trying to sell me something. What came next was far from expected. A voice, low and cautious, crackled through the line, claiming to be a whistleblower from within the government. "Listen to me," the voice urged, panic lacing their tone. "You need to sit down. I have documents that prove there's far more going on than just your property. This toll bridge is one piece in a much larger puzzle of corruption." My heart raced, my body electrified. Was this my chance? I was both electrified and filled with dread. Part of me questioned whether this person was legitimate or merely another trap laid by Mr. Thompson to ensure my silence. Yet desperation propelled my thoughts forward. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper as I leaned closer, almost pressing the device into my ear, as if that would help this stranger share their truth. They hesitated for a moment, perhaps calculating whether they could trust me before finally divulging their identity. "I can meet you," they said, "but we need to do it away from prying eyes. It's too dangerous for me to talk about this on the phone." Veins of anxiety twisted in my gut, but I could feel this was the lead I needed, a possible way to tear Thompson's corrupt schemes apart at the seams. Our appointment was set at a cafe several miles from the demolition site, a place where local gossip thrived, but where our meeting could slide under the radar. Could this stranger truly have the evidence to not only save my home but to expose the parasite that was Mr. Thompson? I had no idea what I was stepping into. My mind raced with sceneries of all forms of betrayal. Was I walking into a trap, or was I finally on the brink of uncovering the truth that would strike at the heart of the corrupt system around us? As the hours passed since that fateful call, every second felt like an eternity. I forced myself to focus on the small tasks at hand around the house, packing boxes and salvaging what little remained of our dreams. Each item I tossed into a box felt like tossing away a piece of myself. There were our children's hand-drawn pictures taped to the walls, remnants of joyful family moments captured in brightly colored crayon. How could I explain to them that all these memories were about to be bulldozed into oblivion? All the while, Mr. Thompson's laughter echoed in my ears, and I resolved that this time I wouldn't remain silent. Finally, the clock struck the hour of our rendezvous. Arriving at the cafe, my heart pounded a frenetic rhythm as I pushed through the door and scanned the room. I spotted a figure, cloaked in a hoodie, hunched over a table in a far corner with their head bowed low. A chill skimmed my spine. Perhaps this was a desperate soul willing to risk everything to bring Thompson down. I approached cautiously, every instinct alert, as I sucked in a sharp breath, preparing for whatever was about to unfold. As I slid into the worn-out seat across from them, the stranger lifted their gaze. I felt the weight of their eyes, dark and determined. For a fleeting moment, I thought I sensed a familiarity there, but doubt trickled in. I'd already been betrayed too many times to let my guard down now. As they reached into their bag, my heart raced. This was it. The evidence that could potentially turn the tide against Mr. Thompson, against a corrupt system that had preyed upon families like mine. What I didn't realize was that the meeting along with the documents would lead me down a path I had never anticipated. Things were about to take a turn, and the stakes had never been higher. The night air simmered with tension as I approached the cafe, wrapped in shadows and the heavy cloak of apprehension. The lanterns inside cast soft circles of light, illuminating the wooden deck, but a chill crawled up my spine, making the warm breeze feel uncomfortably cool. I had just received an urgent message from a whistleblower, a lifeline promising revelations that could unravel the sordid dealings behind the toll bridge and Mr. Thompson's smirk. Yet, trusting someone under these circumstances felt like a gamble where the stakes were my family's future. With each step, my heartbeat thundered in my ears, a wild rhythm that echoed my growing doubts. What had I gotten myself into this time? Was it a glimmer of hope, or merely another snare waiting to trap me deeper in this web of corruption? The dreams of paradise I thought I'd secured had devolved into a nightmare dominated by shadows and deceit. I recalled my home, the laughter of our children, the sun setting over that sparkling waterfront, moments wrapped in joy that now felt stolen, overshadowed by the looming destruction. Drawing closer, I spotted a figure hunched over a table tucked away in a secluded corner. Draped in an oversized hoodie, they blended seamlessly into the dim atmosphere, furtive and hidden. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me, igniting that flickering spark of hope I had almost relinquished. I could feel the weight of my own fear threatening to crush the anticipation. Could this stranger really possess the evidence to topple Thompson's seemingly impervious empire? As I slid into the seat across from them, the stranger lifted their head, and my blood turned cold. It was none other than Mr. Thompson, his slicked-back hair and that charming, affable smile restored to his deceptive glory. He flashed me a grin that twisted my stomach with pent-up rage and disbelief. This was a sick game he was playing, and I had unknowingly stumbled right into his trap. My entire body stiffened as dread washed over me in waves. The whistleblower had been a ruse, a calculated maneuver orchestrated by the same man who had thrust my family into this hellscape. "Surprised to see me?" he drawled, an unnerving delight dancing in his eyes. "I didn't think you'd be so eager to meet. It almost makes me think you really believed in a fairy tale. A naive journalist trying to save the world. Such a romantic notion." My stomach churned as I struggled to keep my composure. It felt as if any shred of hope had been brutally ripped away, leaving behind a devastating void filled with the clanking sounds of my crushed dreams. His voice dragged across my thoughts like a predator's talon, and I couldn't help but see him for what he truly was, a vulture, feasting on the remains of our lives. As he leaned in closer, the underlying threat buried in his words sent shivers down my spine. "You see, it's one thing for you to fight back with hopes of saving your precious home. It's another to stir a nest of hornets, and trust me, you won't like what they'll do to you." He leaned back, fingers drumming on the table, giving the impression of watching my every reaction while suppressing his amusement. Fury bubbled up within me like molten lava, threatening to explode. "You think you can intimidate me into silence? You can't hide forever, Thompson. People will learn about your crimes, and I won't stop until they do." My words echoed off the near-empty walls, firmly grounded by the desperation of my situation. In my heart, I knew I was outmatched, yet my resolve remained unbroken. There had to be a way out of this mess, a path leading to the truth regardless of the cost. His laughter reverberated in my ears, a sinister sound that sank deep into my soul. "You're playing a dangerous game, my friend. Do you truly believe you can fight back with mere hopes and whispers? It doesn't matter how many documents you think you have. The people in power, they're my friends, and they won't side with a little nobody in over their head. It's cute, really." Each word dripped with condescension, deftly slicing through my courage. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I weighed my options. I could choose to fight, to take his threats head-on, or I could retreat and cool my burn of anger. Swaying in my decision like a fragile leaf in a storm, I recalled the heartfelt tales I had collected from the other families, affected by Thompson's schemes. Their hopes were bound within me, and I couldn't allow fear to extinguish the flame of justice burning in my heart. Yet I knew I had to tread carefully. The ideas I had of rallying support were tempered by the realities of an oppressive force, that monstrous man before me. Somehow, I needed to forge alliances, to keep my head down, while planning my next move. I glanced around the cafe, almost expecting eyes watching, waiting. If Thompson had already set his sights on me, it was only a matter of time before I discovered just how deep his reach extended. The whole encounter felt like a turning point, one that could either leave me crushed or ignite the fire to fight back. I needed both the will to survive and the meticulous planning necessary to bring him down. The night was still young, but every second spent in this cafe was a reminder that time was running thin. As I left the table, fists clenched, my mind raced, with possibilities perhaps not today, but someday soon. The tide of this great battle would shift. But with the heaviness of dread lying deep within my gut, I sensed a storm brewing on the horizon. The final round with Mr. Thompson was approaching, and I would have to be ready for whatever came next. After all, the darkness barely contained in his smile whispered that our struggle was far from over. The morning sun pierced through the heavy clouds, casting a blinding light on the remnants of what had once been our home. As I stood there on the site of our demolished dreams, a mix of panic and exhilaration coursed through me. The evidence that had landed in my hands like a fragile gift only hours before had ignited a fire within. It was not merely about the ongoing threat of the toll bridge. It was the damning proof that Mr. Thompson had embezzled recovery funds that should have been directed towards hurricane-struck neighborhoods, a revelation so jarring that it changed everything. With the sunlight illuminating the chaos around me, I made my way to the local council meeting, clutching the documents so tightly that my fingers ached. I had invited state officials, leveraging their clout to ensure that this time, our voices would not be smothered by the blatant arrogance of Mr. Thompson. Entering the council chamber felt surreal. It was as if I were stepping onto a battlefield. Rows of seats were occupied by stakeholders and media representatives, their chatter a hybrid of skepticism and intrigue. But this time, my heart was steeled with determination. As I approached the podium, the air thickened with anticipation. I could see Mr. Thompson sitting smugly at the front, his arms folded as if he was still untouchable. The way he adjusted his tie too tight for comfort only fueled my resolve. I cleared my throat and launched into my presentation, detailing the embezzlement of funds and the corruption that had plagued our community. My voice grew louder with each accusation. I spoke of lives ruined, and homes stolen right from under us. The council members blinked in disbelief, but Mr. Thompson's expression darkened, his charm evaporating into thin air. Suddenly, the state officials rose from their seats, breaking the tension like a thunderclap. They marched forward with the papers I had handed them earlier, validating my claims with authority. They listed the financial misappropriations, linked the stolen funds to Thompson's real estate schemes, and laid bare the truth that had been hidden for so long. I watched as whispers spread like wildfire among the audience, some even gasping at the audacity of the man they had thought untouchable. With every revelation, it was as if layers of fog were lifting from my own memory, revealing moments of quiet doubt and fear that had lingered during our battle. Mr. Thompson's facade of control shattered, replaced by something darker and desperate. He shot up from his chair, the anger boiling over, a stark contrast to his previously charming demeanor. "You're all fools! There's nothing to see here," he bellowed, but his voice cracked under the weight of his impending defeat. As his words ricocheted off the walls, I knew the momentum had shifted irrevocably. Armed guards moved toward him with purpose, their eyes steely as they reached for the handcuffs hanging from their belts. There was a surreal quality to it. All the man who had once made me tremble in fear was now the one whose face echoed confusion and panic. "This isn't over," he spat, his bravado crumbling as they restrained him. Cheers erupted, not cries of joy, but cathartic sounds of relief and reclamation. The council chamber pulsed with a vibrant energy, our fight blossoming into a collective victory that transcended my own losses. Each family that had suffered under Thompson's reign came together like threads intricately woven into a shared tapestry of resilience. We had beaten the odds, not just for ourselves, but for countless others who had been silenced. Once outside the building, I sank onto the steps, the sunlight warming my skin as memories collided in an avalanche of emotion. I thought of the laughter and love that had once graced our waterfront, thought of my children learning to ride their bikes beneath the palm trees I now mourned. We may have lost our home, yet I felt a ripple of hope stirring within me. I was no longer a victim. The embers of a fight burned brightly in my chest, imbued by the stories of neighbors who stood beside me, each of us having reclaimed a fragment of our existence. As I looked across the crowd, I realized that while our physical home may be gone, we had forged a sanctuary in our unity, our struggle together standing as a testament to resilience against corruption. I left the steps that day with ashes still heavy in my heart, but my spirit soared. The toll bridge proposal was dead, and Mr. Thompson would answer for his crimes. We may have sacrificed our peace, but we had regained our narrative. I walked away from that meeting with my head held high, ready to forge a new beginning. After all, every end is simply a chance to start anew, and I would make sure our voices echoed far beyond the broken foundations of our past.